Hi guys, welcome back to my channel For Your Heart and Home. My name is Dee Dee. Welcome into my kitchen. Today I'm working on just a few things in my kitchen that will help us make it through these really hot summer days that we're experiencing right now. I am also trying out a new recipe. My daughter has a birthday coming up and she requested that we have some fried chicken, and to go along with that, I wanted to see if I could make macaroni and cheese from scratch using freshly milled flour. So you all know that we have transitioned fully now to using 100% whole wheat flour, and I'm slowly changing over recipes. Each week I try something different to see how we like the flavor profile, to see if there's anything that I would need to tweak if I wanted to make these meals from scratch. So today you will see me working on making some oven fried chicken. I'm also making some macaroni and cheese as well as some hamburger buns. As usual, I always start by milling my flour, so I'm putting hard white wheat into my flour mill right now so that I can make enough flour for the hamburger buns. And I was also making some muffins for breakfast this day. I'm making blueberry muffins as well as chocolate chip muffins. So one tip I have for anybody who is in a really hot climate right now and is struggling against this heat is to cook early. And my second tip is also to have your kitchen going. So I do a bit of tandem cooking. So if I know I'm going to be using my oven, I do all I can to use up my oven with as many recipes as possible. That way, once I heat up my oven once for the day, that will be it. So we needed muffins for breakfast on this day, but I also needed the hamburger buns for dinner, so I did a bit of tandem cooking. I milled the flour that I needed for the hamburger buns as well as for the muffins, and once I have enough milled, I'm going to get my bread machine going so that I can have the dough created for the hamburger buns. My bread machine takes about an hour and a half to knead the dough, proof the dough, and get it ready for me to shape it and put it into my convection oven. So in that hour and a half, I will be able to make the muffins. I'll also be able to make the noodles I will be using for the macaroni and cheese, and to do some other things in the kitchen. So I like to have that happening where my bread machine is going, I'm warming up my oven so I can put the muffins in. As soon as the muffins are done, I can put the bread in. And so I like to do different things all at once so I can condense my cooking into a shorter space of time. That way I can get in and get out, especially now in the summertime when it's really, really hot. We can't avoid not cooking. So I try to get in early in the morning and I try to get as many things done as quickly as possible so that we don't have to endure this extreme heat all day long. So right now all I'm doing is putting in the wheat berries into my hopper of my grain mill, and I'm working through the recipe to put the hamburger buns into my bread machine. If you've been around here on this channel for a while, you know that I love my bread machine, and I have been using it for 13 plus years. This is my second bread machine. My original one wasn't working anymore, so we had to replace it. But I've been using a bread machine for over 13 years, and I use it for just about everything. I use it for pizza dough, for regular sandwich recipes. I use it for hamburger buns. I used to use it to make pasta until I switched over to a different machine, but I use my bread machine almost every day to make lots and lots of different things. So once I have enough flour milled, I'm going to put all the ingredients into my bread machine bowl for making the hamburger buns. Now, I like to use very basic recipes, and so this recipe that I'm using is actually for sandwich loaves, but it's just a basic recipe and it's a plain recipe and the flavor is wonderful. And so all I do is put in the ingredients for the sandwich loaf recipes, and when my bread machine goes off and the dough cycle is finished, I take it and shape it into hamburger rolls. You can do this as well, and I'll include the recipe in the description box, and you can add whatever toppings you'd like. Some people like to add everything bagel seasoning, or some people like to add sesame seeds. I like to keep them plain because they're more versatile that way. But whenever you're using, whether you're making anything from scratch or whether you're making something using freshly milled flour, I suggest finding a very basic recipe that you can use for different things. It just makes being in the kitchen that much simpler. For the most part, I've memorized this recipe and I don't have to second guess and I don't have to weigh everything because I've gotten so used to using this recipe over and over again. So the next thing I'm working on is the muffins for breakfast on this day. I'm using a very basic muffin recipe and I'm simply just going to flavor it two ways. I'm going to add chocolate chips to one batch and I'll add some blueberries to the second batch. Again, I'm using freshly milled flour, so to that I'm going to add some sugar. I'll add some baking powder, salt, some grapeseed oil, water, and I'm also replacing eggs in many of my recipes. So even though we did our monthly shop and restocked on eggs, I have gotten used to baking without using the eggs. We like the texture and the flavor better, and so instead of using a traditional egg, I'm using a flaxseed egg. And for anyone who doesn't know, you can replace eggs in a baked product using flaxseed. You can take 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed and add it to 1 tablespoon of water, mix it together, give it some time to bloom, similarly to how you would allow yeast to bloom before you use it, and then you can replace that with 1 egg in your recipe. So my muffin recipe calls for 2 eggs, so you will see that I will have 2 tablespoons of flaxseed and 2 tablespoons of water. I mix that together. I put it to the side for a few minutes to allow it to bloom, and then I will add it to my mix. Muffins are a go-to for us here, especially in the summer. They're quick, they're easy, and the kids can grab and go and get them whenever they want to. The less time we have to spend in the kitchen, especially in the summer heat, the better we all feel. So I'm simply going to mix these ingredients together, and I'm going to spoon it into my muffin containers and get that into the oven. So I almost always try to mill a little bit extra because I have to watch my dough. Some days it might be a little bit too dry, some days it might be a little bit too wet. So I always try to mill a little bit extra. And if you are new to freshly milled flour, you know that once you mill the flour, you want to use it as quickly as possible. But if you have a little bit extra left over, no worries. I just put mine into a mason jar, and you can pop that into the refrigerator and you can use that the next time you need to bake or you have need for flour. I will be doing some oven fried chicken later on, and so I'm just going to put this to the side for now because I'm going to add that to the mix that I will be drenching my chicken in. So I have my muffins going in the oven, my bread machine is going, working on the dough for my hamburger buns. So the next thing I'm going to work on is the pasta. I'm using a very basic pasta recipe and I will include it in the description box below, but I'm going to get my mill going again because now I've switched my grains. For my hamburger buns and for the muffins, I was using hard white wheat. For the pasta, I'm using durum wheat. So I will be weighing out the wheat and then I'm going to add it to my grain mill and I'm going to use that to make the pasta for the macaroni and cheese. This pasta machine has been with us for going on about 6 months now, and I absolutely love the ease and simplicity of using this machine. I also love that it works really well with freshly milled flour. So before we made the full transition to using freshly milled flour, I wasn't sure if my bread machine would be able to make the pasta the consistency that I needed. And I was having issues extruding the pasta the way that I like it. So after upgrading to this machine, things have been so much easier. I simply mill the flour and then I will put the ingredients in this pasta machine. It will knead the dough for me. It will extrude the dough as well. And within a few minutes, we can have fresh pasta made with freshly milled flour. Per the instructions of the content creator who created this recipe, it's a good idea to have your dough rest for about 15 minutes between kneading your dough and extruding the pasta. It gives your freshly milled flour opportunity to really absorb the liquid that you will be adding to the dough. Again, I'm going to be making this pasta without the egg, but the content creator has a recipe that includes an egg. So halfway through the 3-minute cycle, I like to pause the machine, scrape the sides to give it an opportunity to fully combine, and then I will allow it to finish its 3-minute cycle. Once the cycle is complete, I will turn the machine off fully, allow it to sit for about 15 minutes, and then after the 15-minute time period, I will turn it back on and allow it to go through the 3-minute cycle completely once again, and then I will extrude the pasta. You will see when it's in its 15-minute of rest time, I'm using that time to grate my cheese. If you've been here a while, you know that we no longer buy shredded cheese and we no longer buy shredded dyed cheese. So I like to buy the cheese on the block and I like to buy the undyed cheese. So again, my goal in the kitchen, especially in the summertime, is to be as efficient as possible. So while I'm waiting for my pasta dough to rest, I am going to shred the cheese. This was my first time making macaroni and cheese from scratch. We haven't had macaroni and cheese in a very long time. And so I wanted to give it a try and it worked out great. I think I will have to work on the flavor of the pasta. Again, I used durum and I'm going to try if I can use hard white wheat next time. It had a very strong wheat flavor, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't as close to the store-bought pasta as you would imagine. So I might play with the flavor profile next time around to see if we can get a different flavor profile. But overall, everyone said it tasted fine and it worked out well. So in the time it took me to shred the cheese, the pasta has rested and it is time to do the extrusion. So again, I'm going to allow the machine to go through a full 3-minute cycle, after which I will allow it to extrude. So here is what the finished pasta looks like. And I'm just going to go through the motions as I would with store-bought pasta. I'm going to boil it in some salt water, drain that off, and then I'm going to add the shredded cheese to that. Here is a look at the completed muffins. Again, I made some chocolate chip muffins as well as some blueberry muffins, and these won't last very long, but we love the flavor, we love the texture, and so this is going to be something that we make a lot this summer because it's just easy, it's filling, and it's brainless. I don't have to really think about it too much. In this time, my bread machine has gone off, and now it is time to shape my rolls. I simply take a part of the dough and I turn it into itself a few times. I will roll it out and then I will place it on the prepared baking sheet. Now you want to give this an opportunity to rest and to double in size. So I am going to shape my rolls and then I'm going to put them on my prepared pan. And since my oven is still warm from making the muffins, I'm going to put this on the back of my stove, and it will allow my hamburger buns to rise more quickly. So that's another tip I have for working in a very hot kitchen in the summertime. You can speed up the process by using your tools that you have at your disposal. My oven is hot and this will allow my dough to rise more quickly, so I'm going to put these rolls covered with a clean tea towel in the warmest part of my kitchen so that they will double in size more quickly. While my dough is doubling in size, I'm going to start working on the chicken. Now, our family really loves fried chicken, but I don't like drenching my chicken in tons and tons of cooking oil. So I've come up with a way that allows me to quote unquote fry my chicken, but in the oven. So I go through the process, I wash my chicken, I season my chicken to my liking, and then I create a flour and breadcrumb mix to dip the chicken in. This is homemade breadcrumbs made from scraps of leftover bread. So whenever my children make a sandwich and if they don't want the crust, I always tell them to cut it off and to reserve the crust. And if there's a bread end or if there's a bread that's a couple days old and not yet moldy or anything, we try to save those in the freezer. Once I have a full Ziploc bag of bread scraps, essentially, I will cut those into crouton sizes and I will put them in my oven and essentially toast them. And once they are toasted, I will then put them in my blender and I will blend them up into breadcrumbs. I've been doing this now for several months, I would say going on almost a year, and I've had no need to buy breadcrumbs from the store. So if you know me, if I can make it at home, I will try my best to do that. And that helps me to replace store-bought items that are filled with additives and preservatives and just things that our bodies really don't need. This is simply breadcrumbs with no preservatives, no additives. It stores well either in your pantry or in your refrigerator. If you have a dehydrator, you can dehydrate these breadcrumbs and then you can vacuum seal them and put them on your shelf. I don't have that, and so I simply just make it into breadcrumbs. I put it in my refrigerator and I do this probably once a month, and that keeps us stocked with breadcrumbs that we can use for situations like this. So anyway, I'm going to season up my chicken, and once I'm done seasoning my chicken, I'm going to dip it in this breadcrumbs and flour mix. So you'll see that I also added some of the freshly milled flour from earlier to the breadcrumbs. Now you can add more seasoning to this. You can also have a drench with egg wash to drench your chicken and then put it into the breadcrumbs mix. But today, again, I'm skipping the use of the eggs. I simply just took the chicken and put it with the breadcrumbs, and then I'm going to lay it on this homemade grill. So again, I'm doing this in my oven because I do not want to have my chicken drenched in a lot of oil. So I simply take a cookie cooling tray and I put it on top of a baking dish that has been lined with parchment paper. I also make sure that I grease my cookie cooling sheet very well so that my chicken doesn't stick to the cookie cooling sheet once it gets into the oven. And I'm going to cover my chicken in breadcrumbs, and then I'm going to put it on the cookie cooling sheet, which will act as a grill. And I'm going to cook this chicken. Halfway through the cooking cycle, I'm going to flip it onto the other side and cook it until it's finished. You want to cover your chicken generously with some oil. So you'll see that at the end, I'm going to use my spray bottle and I'm going to spray my chicken. That's something that we've also replaced in our kitchen. We no longer use the aerosol cooking spray. I simply just use a food safe spray bottle and I refill that with oil whenever needed. And I will use that to spray the chicken before I put it in the oven. The chicken comes out crispy, it's flavorful, and I feel better feeding this to my family because it wasn't sitting in tons and tons of oil. So we get the same experience, just a healthier way. Alright guys, so here is a completed view of my plate for the evening. I made some homemade macaroni and cheese using freshly milled flour, and we also had some fresh homemade hamburger rolls as well as some oven fried chicken, and to that I added some corn on the side. Everything worked out really well. It tasted wonderful, and if you would like any of these recipes, you can check the description box. I will make sure to include the links to those recipes in the description box. I will also have a link to my blog in the description box. There you can find lots of recipes that include freshly milled flour, as I'm slowly changing over my weekly staple recipes to freshly milled flour. So I hope I was able to impart some inspiration for you today. Again, if you are in a location where it's super hot right now and you have to be in the kitchen, efficiency is the key. Start early and try to have several things going at once so that you can be in and out of the kitchen before we all melt. So thanks for being here today. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment down below to let me know what you're working on in your kitchen today, or if there's any questions that you might have. Again, feel free to check the description box. I will make sure to include the links to the recipes that I'm using there. I will also include a link to my blog if you're interested in any recipes, both recipes with freshly milled flour and recipes with all-purpose flour. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate your support. All the best to you, and I'll catch you in the next one.